are also going to share a special. They're going to sing in English and Ukrainian. So we'll be able to understand half of it. But they can really sing, so that's going to be good. Hey, Colton, just to check, did you push that button? We're all good? Okay. I didn't want anything to happen that, could have went on Funniest 10 Videos and we miss out on an opportunity. Now, I had a few topics in mind this past week, which isn't really unusual. Oftentimes, that's kind of how it is. And I'd been planning to look at the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians. I've read through Galatians a couple times the past couple months because I was planning on doing that. And as a matter of fact, I went to visit Robin there on Friday, and she was a little bit tired from a hospital stay. So while I was there, I read through Galatians again. And then just when I was getting ready to write the notes for the message, I happened to see a video, and it was showing some of that devastation down in the North Carolina, Tennessee area. And in this video was a house, and there was before and after pictures. In the before image, it was actually an image that was taken by the Google car, you know what I mean, for the street view. This person found the before images of this house. It was a little blue house, and it was just nestled down along a small creek, and there was a few other homes and buildings nearby. And then in the video that this guy shared, you can see the creek back to about a normal level, but a lot of evidence from that creek having, been pretty high. The major erosion. I think the road was washed out. I mean, it just looks like, God just took a hoe and just went down through that creek valley. And buildings and houses that were there in the first picture, completely demolished, gone. All but that little blue house. And it was just standing right there. Same place, didn't move. I thought maybe, I watched the video twice because I thought maybe they were going to say, look, it like spun around or something. But no, it was same place. All these other houses were gone, but that one house was still there. The video creator, I think he was a Christian content producer. He said, who do you think built this house? And he kind of jokingly said it must have been Noah or God or something. And I mean, he was probably right. God must have had some input on it for a house to withstand those forces. And it made me think that, didn't Jesus say something about building your house on a rock? That's right, Lynn, thank you. So when I went back and reread that parable of building your house on a rock, I realized that it followed a different parable that was about a tree and its fruit. And once I started looking into that more, it kind of tied in with the fruit of the Spirit that I was planning on talking about. So as I read over it a few times, I kind of realized, you know what, that's probably where we need to be looking at today. So this morning we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. We're going to start with verse 24, but we're going to go back to like verse 15 today as well, okay? As you flip there, I'll just go over the background real quick. This account is recorded in both the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. It's in Luke chapter 6. Luke's record is more concise, and it doesn't give quite the content that Matthew's account gives us. In Luke, it's recorded as the Sermon on a Plain, P-L-A-I-N, not like a sermon on an airplane. They didn't have those back then. You can laugh at that. It wasn't that bad a joke. Sandy, you didn't even laugh at that one at first, and you always laugh at my corny jokes. In Matthew, it's listed as the Sermon on the Mount. We're familiar with that one, right? Now, it's very possible that these geographical locations were the same place. Okay, it's possible to have a plain or a flat open field on top of a mount. That's most likely what it was referring to. Matthew at this time, the literal man Matthew that wrote the book and was a disciple, he isn't officially called by Jesus yet to be a disciple. Okay, that doesn't happen for a few chapters yet. I think that's chapter 9. It's possible that he was either witness to this event or that once he came on board, the rest of the disciples filled him in. So Maybe that's why he has more details. I don't know for sure. Luke, though, mentions the 12 disciples' names before this account is recorded. So perhaps Matthew was already with the group, and that's why he knew more. It doesn't really matter either way. This is just one of those things that sometimes people will say, oh, there's discrepancies here. Well, these are minor differences. It's not conflicting stories. It's just how they were arranged by the writer. And honestly, the timeline of it doesn't affect the accuracy of it. It's just how each man decided to record what had happened. And two, the Gospel of Matthew, if you remember, Matthew was a Jewish man, so he focuses on Jesus' life and ministry towards the Jewish nation, okay? Luke, on the other hand, was not Jewish, so his focus is more on God being human form. He was a doctor, so he had an interest in the body, so he kind of focused more on God having a human body, if that makes sense. So that might be why he left some of the details out. This was given right around the beginning of Jesus' ministry. As I said, it was either before or after he had finished calling the disciples, so it was early on in his ministry. And because of that, he hadn't really caused too much grief yet with the Pharisees, but some of the things that he was saying would have started that ball rolling, and you'll see some of those. It should have been enough time for you to find it. It is encouraging to hear the pages turning. I think I hear more and more of that each week, and I'm glad to hear that. So we will start with verse 24. We'll read through to the end of that chapter, and then put your finger on verse 15, and we'll come back to that after a bit. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. Now, something I learned when studying this, Jesus wasn't actually the originator of this parable. Did you know that? This was actually a parable that some of the Pharisees, the teachers, had used, but their version was just a little bit different. As I said, Matthew has a particular focus on Jesus' Jewish heritage and his Jewish knowledge of their culture and history and things like that. So that's why Jesus is quoting some Jewish thinkers here. These teachers would say it like this. They would say, anyone who hears the words of the Torah and follows them is like a man who builds his house on a rock. Well, what did Jesus say? Anyone who hears whose words? My words, right? Anyone who hears the words of Jesus and applies them is like a man who built his house on a rock. Do you remember what the Torah is and was? Yeah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Colton. Those are the ones that focus on the history and the laws, okay? So these teachers, these Pharisees were saying, anyone who knows these laws and follows them, he's like the man that's building his house on a rock. Jesus, on the other hand, says, it's not about that stuff. Listen to the words that I tell you. Build your life and your house on the words I tell you. And this, as I said, is just kind of the beginning of Jesus starting to say some things that are going to tick off the religious leaders. Claiming that his words were as important as the words handed down through Moses was really blasphemous, because as we know, those were the words of God. So for Jesus to say, listen to my words instead, or in addition to, that's Jesus claiming to be God himself, which, as we know, the Pharisees just couldn't stand for. I probably don't really need to explain this parable here. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Just in a nutshell, hear what Jesus says, follow what Jesus says, and you'll find security in him. Build on other things, and you're going to face collapse. That's it. Now, his words resonated with this crowd because, as it says, his words carried the weight of confidence and authority as he opposed the Pharisees' teaching that these people were used to. But what were these words that Jesus said to build your firm foundation upon? Now, for time's sake, I'm not covering them all this morning, but I would like to start working back from the end of this chapter. And as I said, we're going to pick up with verse 15. The true and false prophets. Watch out for the false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. In Jesus' time, and even yet today, the major predator of sheep was wolves. The shepherd was then always diligent to watch out for that obvious threat of a wolf getting into the flock. Imagine, though, as Jesus did and was trying to get his listeners to, how difficult it would be to decipher a sheep from a wolf if the wolves looked just like the sheep. Now, when I read this, I was kind of thinking of that cartoon image. I don't remember if it was Wile E. Coyote or if it was something else I saw where the wolf or the coyote kind of dresses up like something innocent, but you can see like his nose sticking out. Maybe it was like Little Red Riding Hood where he dresses up like the grandmother, just something obvious. I don't think Jesus is meaning like that. I think he's really meaning, watch out for these who are perfectly hidden like sheep. It's downright subterfuge, things like we see in wartime. It's tricky stuff. It's kind of like James Bond, the double agents like James Bond, where they're so hidden that they're hidden multiple times over. But the good news about this is that Jesus tells us exactly how to identify them. In verse 16, he says, "By their fruit you will recognize them. The people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles." Do you know what this is? This is Dendrology 101. Now, for those of you that didn't major in forestry, that's tree ID, okay? This is pretty simple. Now, when I was in school, we had to be able to identify trees by their fruit, their leaves, their form, their bark, their buds, and also wood samples from them. And I tried to list those in order of most easy to most difficult. Now, do you remember what Jesus said we can use to discern whether a tree is good or bad? Whether it's a wolf or a true sheep or shepherd? He said you can use the fruit. That's the easiest way to identify a tree species. It only gives off one fruit. Now, I know what Sam's probably thinking. He's thinking, I'm sure glad we don't have to identify wolves by looking for the absence or presence of tyloses and whether they're open or closed in the woods cross-section. Right, Sam? So far. That's the kind of stuff you got to look at underneath a microscope when you're using a piece of wood to identify the tree species. But we don't have to do that. Jesus says all you got to do is look at the fruit. Likewise, in verse 17, he says, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree, it bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Say that 5 times fast. Now, are these verses saying that if a person produces bad fruit, then they're a bad tree? Well, yes, but also no at the same time. And I say that because in my mind, I have multiple definitions of the word bad in my head. The definition Jesus is using here is undesirable. So he's not meaning like bad fruit, like an apple tree produces an apple that gets a bruise and it spoils, or a stink bug bites an apple and it causes a wound on it. He's saying that undesirable fruit. In verse 16, as we just read, it said, Jesus says, can grapes come from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? He's saying the pricker bushes, they don't produce grapes and figs, the fruit that we're after, okay? He didn't say that if somebody has a damaged apple on them, that it's automatically a bad tree, right? No, he's saying, look to see if that tree is producing what it's supposed to be producing genetically, okay? Does it have a propensity to produce that desirable fruit? We know that Jesus uses shriveled and stunted or even damaged fruit to make the best things in life, pies and jellies and jams and sauces. I think I'm a little hungry maybe. But he can't make those things from thistles and pricker bushes, right? That's what he's saying. He says every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. He takes those bad trees that don't have the ability to produce the desired fruit, cuts them down, and he burns them. Why? So that they can't reproduce and spread. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Once again, it's just the fruit that we have to look for. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. I know there's just a comma here in verse 21, but I have to interject a little bit. And I'd really just like to read that again. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. How in the world can that be? Well, we have to read on. But only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Only the one who does the will gets in. It's not enough to know Jesus, to know his name, to get in. You have to do the will of the Father. Now, you might be thinking, I thought it wasn't about works, though. And you're right, it's not about works, but just like we were talking about fruit this morning and a couple weeks ago, we have to be producing the fruit that we have the propensity to produce, okay? A grapevine naturally produces fruit, right? You don't have to go out and ask your grapevine to produce fruit. That's what it's supposed to do. Just like a vine or a branch on a tree, it should be natural to us as followers of Jesus to be producing fruit for him. We don't want to make Jesus have to search into the grains of wood in our lives to see if we truly are a desirable species, do we? Just bear the fruit. Just do the easy thing. That might be embracing those that don't believe like us. Maybe being a kind smile in a conversation to somebody at the gas pump. Once you see the bill at the gas pump, you really need a kind smile, I tell you that much. That might be being patient with a waitress who's having a rough day. Maybe putting aside a little bit of greed to show generosity to someone in need. It might just be taking a little bit of time to do what is right in a given situation. Maybe giving a call of encouragement to a coworker through a tough time. It might be biting your tongue when you want to speak your mind. Maybe turning the other cheek to someone that doesn't deserve it. Kind of sounds like the fruit of the Spirit, doesn't it? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do you know what I always do before I buy something anymore? Something new, at least. What do? You get on Amazon and you read the... No, I don't read instructions, Lynn. Instructions. The reviews, right? You read the reviews. Our life should be the only review that people need to read. I'm not saying I don't want them to read the Bible. I do. But I'm saying that when they see us, they should say, this Jesus must be pretty good. You know, that's the main reason I buy a new tool or something like that, is because I see somebody else using it and I think, whatever it is that they have, that's something that I need. Does your life display that to others? Now, many will say to me on that day, picking up in verse 22, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? Now listen up. We can see miraculous signs done under the guise of Jesus' name, yet it can be completely devoid of his Spirit. That's what Jesus is saying here. That's not anything I made up. We see this today on TV preachers. Not every one of them, but there's some of them. These might be on YouTube or TikToks or things like that. You know, you click on a video, watch 500 healings performed after the service. Click on another video, you watch this man shaking here for the past 20 minutes, just instantly stop convulsing. Now, am I saying that Jesus doesn't heal and display miracles today? Of course not. Some of us have seen him work miracles in our lives. But he tells us here that there will be some doing miracles in his name who he does not know. Tell me that's not something scary to think about. That's a wolf in sheep's skin, isn't it? Has anyone in here ever been a bank teller? Sue, you have? Now, you're going to wish you didn't raise your hand now. Just real quick, I have like two questions. When you were at bank tellering school, did they hand you a stack of fake bills to practice with? I'll remind you, no, they didn't. Do you know why they didn't hand you fake money? It's so that you only know the feel of real money. I checked this with a bank teller, just so you know. It's so that bank tellers only know the feel of real money. So that if a counterfeit comes across the counter to them, instantly you know it's not something you felt before. We live in a world of counterfeits. I've been duped before, I'll be honest. You go to buy something that's brand name, and 2 days later the sticker peels off and you realize that you got suckered. Just this past week, Abby and I found a scam on Facebook. We thought we found a deal for a play set, and it was good until they wanted a deposit. We're like, yeah, that's a scam. Everywhere we look, Facebook, X, I think that's what they call Twitter now, right? X, TikTok, churches across America, we find a lot of false information, don't we? Don't follow these false prophets. What do we need to do? We need to look at their fruit. Then I will tell them plainly, Jesus says, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Now, I don't want to hear those words, do you? Have you ever mistaken somebody maybe in a store? I did that one time. I saw somebody that I knew in Walmart. I walked the whole way to the other side of the store to say hi to her, and she looked at me like I was an idiot, which I am. And then I remembered she has an identical twin sister. Yep. So, we all know that embarrassment, right? You think you know somebody until you get up there and make a fool out of yourself, and you're like, yeah, you're not the person I thought you were. Why do I bring that up? Not to tell you that I'm an idiot and I've done it. It's for this reason. I don't want that to happen to us with Jesus. I don't want us to get to him and we say, oh, hey, Jesus, and he look at you and say, who are you? All you got to do is remain on the vine. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. And bear the fruit. That's all we have to do. Remain in Jesus and do what it is he's called us to do. As Barry pointed out, there's so many people in this world today that so desperately need to hear about him. All we have to do, remain in him. Study his word. Be involved with other like-minded Christian believers and bear fruit. It's not hard to do. He's not asking for us to go out and do things we're not called to do. Just do the things that come naturally to us in a way that glorifies Jesus. Would you close in prayer with me? Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for your word. We thank you that sometimes your word is just pretty straightforward. We just need to do things that bring fruit for you, Lord. I know it's hard sometimes to step out and to do these things, to strike up a conversation or to be generous to somebody. Lord, but would you just give us the encouragement? You know the world that we live in, and you know that Satan wants nothing more than to keep us from doing what it is that you would have us to do. Lord, would you just give us that encouragement to do the things that are sometimes awkward or maybe a little bit embarrassing at first, to just reach out and show somebody the light that you've given us. Give us those opportunities as we leave here. Don't let us be blind to the need for you in our communities, Lord. Be with us and just help us to show that love that you've given us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Even when I'm walking through the valley of dark shadows, even when I'm overwhelmed beneath the weight of